Hi, I'm Mia, 28 years old, and I thought I knew what family love looked like. Growing up, I always believed that no matter what happened, your family would be there to support you through thick and thin. That's what mothers are supposed to do, right? Stand by their children, celebrate their victories, help them through their struggles. But sometimes, life has a funny way of showing you that the people you trust most can be the ones who hurt you deepest. Last Thanksgiving, during what should have been a celebration of gratitude and togetherness, my mother said something that shattered everything I believed about our relationship. It was the moment that changed everything forever. Before I share what happened that Thanksgiving evening, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you've ever felt undervalued by family, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories. Trust me, this one will make you rethink what family really means. To understand what happened that night, you need to know the history between my mother Patricia and me. Our relationship had always been complicated, but it wasn't always this way. When I was little, before my father David died when I was 12, things felt different. Dad had this way of balancing out Mom's sharp edges, making our house feel warm and welcoming, but after we lost him, everything changed. Not just because we were grieving, but because suddenly we were struggling financially in ways we never had before. Mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, and I could see the stress eating away at her day by day. But somewhere along the way, that stress transformed into something else. It became resentment, and unfortunately, a lot of that resentment seemed to land squarely on my shoulders. I became the reminder of everything that was difficult in her life. Every school fee, every doctor's appointment, every request for lunch money became evidence of how much I was costing her. The comments started small. Little remarks about how expensive I was to raise, how other kids didn't need as much, how if she didn't have to worry about me, maybe she could finally relax. When I got sick and needed medicine, she'd sigh heavily and mutter about how she couldn't afford another bill. When I needed school supplies, she'd make sure I knew exactly how much each item cost and how hard she had to work to pay for it. But I was determined to change that narrative. I threw myself into my studies, earning a full scholarship to State University for graphic design. I thought maybe then she'd be proud. Maybe then she'd see that her investment in me was worth it. But even that achievement was met with a dismissive comment about how I was lucky to get free school since we couldn't afford to pay for it anyway. College was my escape. For 4 years, I could focus on building my skills and preparing for a career that would finally prove my worth. I studied late into the night, took on internships that paid nothing but gave me experience, and graduated with honors. But when I walked across that stage, Mom wasn't in the audience. She said she had to work and couldn't take the day off. After graduation, I struggled like most new graduates do. The graphic design field is competitive, and finding steady work took time. I took on freelance projects, worked part-time retail jobs, and slowly built up my portfolio. Every time I visited home during those lean years, Mom would make comments about how my expensive education wasn't paying off very well, was it? But I kept pushing forward. Last year, everything finally clicked. I landed a position at a prestigious advertising agency downtown, and 6 months later they promoted me to senior graphic designer with a salary that finally allowed me to live comfortably. I moved into a beautiful apartment, started saving money, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt financially secure. That's when I made the decision to host Thanksgiving dinner. I wanted to show my family, especially Mom, that I had made it. That all those years of struggle had led to something meaningful. I spent weeks planning the perfect dinner. I researched recipes, bought the finest ingredients, and prepared every dish from scratch. My apartment had never looked better. I arranged fresh flowers, polished every surface, and set the table with my grandmother's china that I had carefully saved up to buy back from the estate sale years earlier. I should probably explain the cast of characters who would be joining us that Thanksgiving, because understanding the family dynamics is crucial to what happened later. My mother Patricia has always lived in the shadow of her older brother Robert, who became a successful real estate developer. Uncle Robert never missed an opportunity to remind everyone about his achievements driving up in his luxury car and wearing expensive suits to family gatherings. His wife, my Aunt Susan, was a former elementary school teacher who had developed a talent for passive-aggressive comments wrapped in sweet smiles. She had this way of complimenting you that somehow made you feel worse about yourself afterward. Their daughter Jessica, my cousin, who's 2 years older than me, had always been held up as the golden child of our generation. She married her high school sweetheart, had 2 adorable kids, and taught at the same school where Aunt Susan used to work. In Mom's eyes, Jessica was everything a daughter should be. Then there was Mark, Uncle Robert's son, who's 2 years younger than me. At 26, Mark still lived at home, couldn't hold down a job for more than a few months, and had a drinking problem that everyone pretended didn't exist. But somehow in the twisted logic of our family, Mark was still treated with more respect than I ever was. His failures were explained away as him finding his path, or being too creative for traditional work. The week before Thanksgiving, I called Mom to finalize the menu and make sure everyone could accommodate any dietary restrictions. During that conversation, she made several comments that should have warned me what was coming. She questioned whether my apartment was big enough for everyone, suggested that maybe we should have gone with Jessica's house instead, since she had more experience entertaining, and wondered aloud if I was showing off by insisting on hosting. But I brushed off these concerns. I was excited to share my success, and I truly believed that once everyone saw how well I was doing, the dynamic would shift. My boyfriend Jake, who had been with me for 8 months at that point, had witnessed some of these family interactions before and had gently suggested that maybe my expectations were too high. But I convinced him that this time would be different. Jake had grown up in a warm, supportive family where achievements were celebrated and failures were met with encouragement to try again. He couldn't quite understand why I was so anxious about proving myself to people who should have been proud of me regardless. His perspective was both comforting and heartbreaking, because it showed me what healthy family relationships could look like. The night before Thanksgiving, as I put the finishing touches on my apartment and prepared the ingredients for the next day's feast, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety that I couldn't quite shake. I had spent nearly $1,000 on this dinner, wanting everything to be perfect. The turkey was organic and free-range. The wine was carefully selected, and every side dish was made from scratch using the highest quality ingredients I could afford. Thanksgiving morning arrived with crisp autumn air and the promise of what I hoped would be a new beginning for my family relationships. I woke up early to start the turkey and begin the elaborate preparation process I had planned. Jake arrived around 9 in the morning to help with the final preparations, and I could see the concern in his eyes as he watched me frantically checking and rechecking every detail. The first family members to arrive were Uncle Robert and Aunt Susan, who walked into my apartment with the kind of expression you might wear when visiting a museum exhibit you're not particularly impressed by. Uncle Robert immediately began evaluating my living space like he was conducting a property assessment, commenting on the square footage and questioning whether the neighborhood was really as safe as it looked. Aunt Susan's approach was more subtle but equally cutting. She complimented my decorating choices with phrases like, "How brave of you to choose such bold colors," and "It's so nice that you're comfortable with minimalism." Every compliment came with an undertone that suggested I had somehow missed the mark of proper adult living. When Mom arrived with Jessica and her family, the real performance began. She walked through my apartment pointing out things to Jessica as if she were conducting a tour. "Look at how much Mia spent on this couch," she said, running her hand over the fabric. "Must be nice to have money to throw around like that." When Jessica complimented the beautiful flower arrangements I had created, Mom quickly redirected the attention by talking about how Jessica always made her own centerpieces and how much more personal that was. Mark stumbled in about an hour later, clearly already having started his holiday drinking, and immediately made himself comfortable on my expensive couch with his dirty shoes up on the cushions. When I gently asked him to remove his shoes, Mom jumped to his defense, saying I was being too precious about my furniture and that families should feel comfortable in each other's homes. The early afternoon was filled with small moments like these. Every effort I made to create a warm, welcoming environment was somehow turned into evidence of my character flaws. I was either trying too hard, spending too much money, or being too controlling about how things should be done. Jake watched these interactions with growing amazement later, telling me he had never seen a family work so hard to diminish someone who was trying to do something nice for them. When we finally sat down for dinner, I felt like I was walking on eggshells despite being in my own home. The turkey was perfectly cooked, the sides were delicious, and the presentation was restaurant quality. But instead of acknowledging the effort and skill that had gone into the meal, the conversation quickly turned to comparisons with previous family gatherings. Mom spent 10 minutes describing in detail how wonderful Jessica's Thanksgiving had been the previous year, emphasizing how homey and comfortable it felt compared to what she called my fancy approach. Uncle Robert chimed in with stories about expensive restaurants he had been to, making it clear that while my food was adequate, it wasn't quite up to the standards of someone who had truly made it in life. As dinner progressed, the conversation inevitably turned to careers and life choices, which I should have seen coming, but somehow still wasn't prepared for. Uncle Robert began by talking about his latest real estate developments, making sure everyone understood just how successful his business had become. He threw around numbers, casually mentioning million-dollar deals and exclusive clients as if they were everyday occurrences. From there, the spotlight moved to Jessica, with Mom leading the charge in praising her daughter's career as an elementary school teacher. Teaching is such noble work. Mom said, her voice filled with warmth I rarely heard when she talked about my accomplishments. Jessica is shaping young minds, making a real difference in the world. Not everyone can say their work actually matters like that. The implication hung in the air like smoke. My work in advertising apparently didn't matter in the same way. Creating visual campaigns that helped businesses succeed, working with teams to solve complex communication problems, bringing creative visions to life, none of that counted as meaningful work in Mom's estimation. Uncle Robert nodded sagely and added his own commentary about the importance of stable careers with good benefits and retirement plans. That's the thing about teaching, he said. It's recession-proof. People always need teachers, unlike some industries that come and go with trends and fads. I tried to redirect the conversation by sharing news about my recent promotion and the salary increase that came with it. I explained how the advertising agency had recognized my work and given me additional responsibilities, including managing a team of junior designers. I thought surely this concrete evidence of professional success would shift the tone of the discussion. Instead, Mom's response was to minimize my achievement completely. "Well, it's easy to get promoted when you're young and don't have real responsibilities," she said dismissively. "Wait until you have a mortgage and children, and see how far that career gets you then." Aunt Susan jumped in with her own perspective, suggesting that my generation had unrealistic expectations about work and money. In my day, we understood that work was about service, not personal fulfillment or big paychecks, she said, with that sweet smile that made her words even more cutting. The conversation then shifted to family financial responsibilities and what each of us contributed to taking care of aging parents and extended family needs. This was dangerous territory, and I could feel the trap being set, but I walked right into it anyway. Uncle Robert began talking about how important it was for successful family members to help those who were struggling. He mentioned several ways he had helped his parents over the years, making sure everyone understood his generosity. Jessica added stories about helping her in-laws and contributing to various family emergencies over the years. Then Mom delivered the setup that would lead to the devastating blow that was coming. "It's funny how family responsibility works," she said, looking directly at me. "Some people understand that success means helping others, and some people think success means buying expensive furniture and showing off." I felt the blood rising to my cheeks, but I tried to stay calm and respond rationally. I explained that I had actually been helping family members financially for years, just more quietly than others. I had been sending Mom money regularly since I got my first decent-paying job. I had covered Mark's car payments twice when he was out of work. I had contributed to Uncle Robert's business when he needed a short-term loan, though he had never publicly acknowledged that help. But instead of acknowledging these contributions, the family seemed to close ranks against me. Mark, who had been increasingly drunk and belligerent throughout the dinner, started making comments about how people who live in fancy apartments shouldn't lecture others about family responsibility. Uncle Robert questioned whether my financial help had really been as significant as I was claiming. The worst part was watching Jake's face as he witnessed this coordinated attack on someone he cared about. He tried a few times to redirect the conversation or defend my achievements, but each attempt was quickly shut down or ignored. I could see him struggling to understand how a family could treat one of their own this way, especially someone who had worked so hard to build a life they should have been proud of. The moment that changed everything came during what should have been a casual conversation about future family gatherings and holiday plans. We had moved from the dining table to the living room, and I was serving coffee and the homemade pumpkin pie I had spent hours perfecting the day before. The atmosphere had been tense all evening, but I was still hoping we could end on a positive note. Mom was sitting in my favorite armchair, the one I had saved up for months to buy, and she was holding her coffee cup with the kind of delicate precision that somehow made it look like she was criticizing my choice of dishes. Jessica was showing everyone pictures on her phone of her children's recent school activities, and the room was filled with the warm admiration that I had been craving all evening. "Jessica, you're such a wonderful mother," Mom said, her voice soft with genuine affection. "Your children are so lucky to have someone who puts their needs first, someone they can always count on." Uncle Robert nodded in agreement and added, "That's what family is all about. Being there for each other, being reliable, being the kind of person others can depend on." I saw an opening in the conversation and tried once more to share something positive about my own life. I mentioned that Jake and I had been talking about our future together, about maybe starting to think about marriage and eventually having children of our own. I thought this would show them that I understood family values, that I wasn't just focused on career and material success. But instead of the warm response Jessica's family updates had received, my news was met with a different kind of attention. Mom's expression shifted, and I could see her preparing to deliver what she probably thought was some necessary tough love. "Mia, honey," she said, and the false sweetness in her voice should have warned me what was coming. "I think you need to be realistic about your situation. Just because you have a nice apartment and a decent job right now doesn't mean you're ready for the kind of responsibilities that come with marriage and family." Aunt Susan nodded knowingly and added, "It's important to be financially stable before you take on obligations to other people. You want to make sure you can contribute to a partnership, not be a drain on it." I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach, but I tried to defend myself calmly. I explained that I was financially stable, that my career was progressing well, and that Jake and I were both responsible adults who had thought carefully about our future together. That's when Mom delivered the words that would echo in my mind for months afterward. She set down her coffee cup, looked directly at me with an expression of what she probably thought was maternal wisdom, and said with complete conviction, "Honestly, Mia, you can decorate this place and cook fancy meals, but you'll always be a burden to this family. We all know it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mark, who had been making snide comments all evening, seemed shocked by the bluntness of what she had just said. Jake's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips, and I watched his face transform from surprise to anger to protective fury in the span of about 3 seconds. But it was the reaction of the other family members that really broke my heart. Uncle Robert suddenly became very interested in his phone. Aunt Susan examined her fingernails as if they held the secrets of the universe. Jessica stared at her lap, unwilling to make eye contact with anyone. Mark actually looked uncomfortable for the first time all evening, but not uncomfortable enough to say anything in my defense. In that moment of silence, something inside me shattered, but something else was born. All those years of trying to prove myself worthy of love and acceptance, all those hours of wondering what I was doing wrong, all those moments of feeling like I wasn't quite good enough. Suddenly it all made sense. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them needing someone to be less than so they could feel better about themselves. I felt Jake's hand reach for mine under the table, and his touch gave me the strength I needed to find my voice. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to speak my truth to this family. Consequences be damned. What happened next surprised everyone in that room, including me. Instead of crumbling under the weight of Mom's cruel words, like I had done so many times before, I felt something shift inside me. All those years of swallowing insults, accepting criticism, and trying to earn love that should have been freely given had led to this moment. I was done being their emotional punching bag. I stood up slowly and my voice was steady when I spoke, which seemed to surprise them more than if I had started yelling. "You know what, Mom?" I said, looking directly into her eyes. "You're absolutely right. I have been a burden to this family, but not in the way you think." The room was so quiet you could hear the coffee cooling in their cups. I continued, "I've been a burden because I've spent my entire adult life trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it. I've been a burden because I kept believing that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, gave enough, maybe you'd finally be proud of me." Mom opened her mouth to interrupt, but I held up my hand and kept going. "Let me finish because I'm going to say this once, and then we're going to have a very different kind of relationship going forward." I turned to address the whole room, making eye contact with each person as I spoke. "Uncle Robert, you want to talk about family responsibility? I've been sending my mother $500 every month for the past 2 years to help with her expenses. That's $12,000 in case you're keeping track." Uncle Robert's confident expression faltered, and I saw him glance uncertainly at Mom, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and anger. "Mark," I continued, turning to my cousin, who was suddenly looking very sober, "remember when you couldn't make your car payments last winter? And again this spring I covered both of those for you. That was $1,400 total. And when you needed money for that job training program, you never actually finished another $800. Mark started to say something, but I wasn't finished. "And Uncle Robert, when you needed that short-term business loan 18 months ago because your accounts receivable were tied up in that big development project, I gave you $15,000. You paid me back eventually, but you never mentioned it to anyone else, did you?" The silence was becoming uncomfortable for them now, but I was just getting started. I had years of suppressed truth to share. "Jessica," I said, turning to my cousin, who still couldn't meet my eyes, "I've contributed to every birthday party, every school fundraiser, and every family emergency for your kids. When your husband was out of work last year, who do you think paid for their Christmas presents? It wasn't Santa." Now I turned back to Mom, and my voice grew stronger with each word. "And you, Mom. You want to call me a burden. I've been supporting you financially while listening to you tell everyone who would listen how disappointed you are in me. I've been covering your expenses while you praise Mark for his potential and Jessica for her noble career choice." Mom finally found her voice. "Mia, you're being dramatic. That's not how things are." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "That's exactly how things are. But here's what's going to change. I'm done apologizing for my success. I'm done trying to make myself smaller so you can feel bigger. I'm done being grateful for scraps of approval from people who should be celebrating my achievements." Jake squeezed my hand tighter, and I could see the pride in his eyes. That gave me the courage to continue. "I worked my way through college while you complained about how much my textbooks cost. I built a career while you dismissed it as unimportant. I achieved financial stability while you predicted I would fail. And through all of that, I kept trying to win your approval by giving you my time, my energy, and my money." Aunt Susan tried to interject with something about family harmony, but I cut her off. "Aunt Susan, you've spent this entire evening making passive-aggressive comments about my home, my choices, and my life. You want to talk about family harmony? Harmony doesn't require me to pretend your insults are compliments." The power dynamic in the room had completely shifted, and I could see them all struggling to adjust to this new version of me. The version that wouldn't accept mistreatment with a smile. What followed was the most honest conversation I had ever had with my family. Though calling it a conversation might be generous, since it was mostly me setting boundaries while they tried various strategies to restore the previous dynamic. Mom's first approach was to try to minimize what she had said, suggesting that I was overreacting to what she claimed was just honest family feedback. "I was just trying to help you be realistic about your situation," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "No, Mom," I replied calmly. "Calling your daughter a burden in front of the entire family isn't helpful feedback. It's cruelty. And I'm done pretending it's anything else." Uncle Robert tried a different tactic, suggesting that families sometimes say things they don't mean when emotions run high. "We're all family here, Mia. Family forgives and moves forward." I looked at him steadily and said, "You're absolutely right, Uncle Robert. Family should forgive and move forward. So I'm going to forgive all of you for years of treating me like I was somehow defective for achieving success on my own terms. But moving forward is going to look very different than moving backward." Jessica finally spoke up, her voice small and uncertain. "Mia, I think maybe we all got carried away tonight. You know we care about you." "Do you, Jessica?" I asked, not unkindly but with genuine curiosity. Because caring looks different than what I experienced tonight. Caring looks like celebrating someone's achievements instead of minimizing them. Caring looks like defending your family member when they're being attacked, not sitting silently while it happens. The room fell quiet again, and I could see them processing this new reality where I wouldn't accept mistreatment and call it love. Jake finally spoke, his voice controlled, but with an edge of anger I rarely heard from him. "I've been sitting here all evening watching people who are supposed to love Mia systematically tear down everything she's accomplished. I've watched her try over and over to share good news and have it dismissed or turned into criticism. What I saw tonight wasn't family dinner. It was bullying." Mom turned on Jake with a flash of anger. "You don't understand our family dynamics. We've always been honest with each other." "There's a difference between honesty and cruelty," Jake replied steadily. "And what happened here tonight was cruelty." I felt a surge of gratitude for Jake's support, but I also knew this was my battle to fight. Jake's right, and this isn't his fight. This is about me finally standing up for myself after years of accepting unacceptable treatment. I took a deep breath and delivered the boundaries I had been formulating in my mind. Here's how things are going to work going forward. I will no longer attend family gatherings where I'm expected to be a verbal punching bag for everyone else's insecurities. I will no longer provide financial support to family members who show me no respect. I will no longer apologize for my success or try to hide it to make others comfortable. The protests started immediately. Mark complained that I was being unfair and holding grudges. Aunt Susan suggested I was letting pride get in the way of family relationships. Uncle Robert tried to convince me that I was making a mistake I would regret. But Mom's reaction was the most telling. Instead of apologizing or acknowledging the pain she had caused, she doubled down. "Fine, Mia. If that's how you want to be, then that's your choice. But don't come crying to us when your fancy life falls apart and you need your family." Her words confirmed everything I had suspected about her motivations. She wasn't just indifferent to my success. She was actively hoping for my failure because my achievements challenged the narrative she had built about me. "I won't be coming to you if my life falls apart, Mom," I said quietly. But not because I'm proud or stubborn, because I finally learned that real family builds you up instead of waiting for you to fall down. The evening ended with an awkward and uncomfortable departure. There were no hugs goodbye, no promises to call soon, no attempts to smooth things over with false pleasantries. They gathered their coats and purses with the kind of quiet efficiency people use when they're trying to escape an uncomfortable situation. After they left, Jake and I sat in my living room, surrounded by the remnants of what I had hoped would be a perfect family dinner. The turkey was barely touched, the expensive wine mostly undrunk, the homemade desserts sitting abandoned on the counter. But instead of feeling devastated by the waste and the conflict, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused to accept mistreatment and call it love. The days and weeks that followed that Thanksgiving dinner were a mixture of relief, guilt, sadness, and ultimately profound personal growth. The immediate aftermath was exactly what you might expect. My phone started ringing the next morning with various family members trying different approaches to restore the previous dynamic. Mark called first, slurring slightly, even though it was barely 10 in the morning, demanding to know why I was acting like such a bitch and threatening to tell everyone what a terrible person I was. I listened to his voicemail once and deleted it without calling back. Aunt Susan's approach was more subtle but equally manipulative. She sent a long text message about how disappointed she was in my behavior, how I had embarrassed the whole family, and how my poor mother was just trying to help me become a better person. She suggested that I owe everyone an apology for my outburst, and that mature adults know how to accept constructive criticism. Uncle Robert tried the business approach, calling to lecture me about burning bridges and damaging professional relationships. He reminded me that family connections could be important for career advancement, and suggested that I was being short-sighted in my reaction to what he called a minor family disagreement. Jessica's response was perhaps the most painful, because it came closest to what I had hoped for, but still fell short. She called crying, saying she felt terrible about what had happened and that she wanted to fix things. But when I asked her directly if she thought Mom's comment about me being a burden was acceptable, she couldn't bring herself to say no. Instead, she kept trying to explain everyone's motivations and asking me to understand their perspectives. The most interesting response came from Mom herself. For the first week, she didn't contact me at all. Then I received a series of text messages that perfectly illustrated her mindset. The first message blamed me for ruining Thanksgiving and embarrassing her in front of the family. The second message accused me of being ungrateful for everything she had sacrificed for me over the years. The third message threatened to cut me out of her life if I didn't apologize and return to being the daughter she expected me to be. What she didn't understand was that her threats no longer had power over me. I had spent so many years afraid of losing her approval that I never recognized how little approval she was actually giving me. The threat of withdrawal from someone who was already emotionally unavailable wasn't the devastating blow she expected it to be. I didn't respond to most of these contacts, which seemed to confuse everyone. They had expected me to either apologize and return to the previous dynamic, or to engage in ongoing drama and conflict. My choice to simply step back and focus on my own life was apparently not a scenario they had considered. Jake was incredibly supportive during this time, but I could see that witnessing my family's behavior had been eye-opening for him in ways that were difficult to process. He had grown up with parents who celebrated his achievements, siblings who supported his goals, and extended family who genuinely enjoyed spending time together. The idea that family members would systematically undermine each other was foreign to his experience. "I keep trying to understand their motivations," he told me one evening as we walked through the park near my apartment. "But every explanation I come up with makes them look worse, not better." That conversation helped me realize something important. I had spent so many years trying to understand and excuse their behavior that I had never simply accepted it at face value. They treated me poorly because they chose to treat me poorly. They minimized my achievements because it served some psychological need in them. They expected me to accept mistreatment because I had always accepted it before. The turning point in my healing process came when I decided to start therapy with a counselor who specialized in family dynamics and childhood emotional trauma. I had resisted therapy for years because I thought it meant admitting there was something wrong with me. But I finally understood that therapy wasn't about fixing myself. It was about learning healthier ways to navigate relationships and set boundaries. Dr. Martinez helped me understand patterns that had been invisible to me before. She explained how families sometimes designate one member as the identified problem or scapegoat, and how this role serves the psychological needs of other family members by giving them someone to blame for their own issues and insecurities. Through our sessions, I began to recognize how much energy I had been spending trying to manage other people's emotions and reactions. I had been so focused on earning approval and avoiding conflict that I had never asked myself what I actually wanted from these relationships. The work was difficult and sometimes painful, but it was also liberating. I started to understand that my worth as a person wasn't determined by my family's opinion of me. I began to recognize my own achievements and celebrate my own successes without needing external validation. About 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, something interesting happened at work. My supervisor mentioned that I seemed more confident and decisive in team meetings. My colleagues started asking my opinion more often. My creative work improved because I was no longer second-guessing every decision or apologizing for taking up space. The changes in my professional life made me realize how much my family relationships had been affecting every other area of my life. When you grow up believing that you need to earn love through achievement, and that your achievements will never be good enough anyway, it creates a constant state of anxiety and self-doubt that follows you everywhere. As months passed, I began to understand what healthy relationships actually look like, and started building those connections intentionally. The contrast with my family dynamics was stark and illuminating. My relationship with Jake deepened as he witnessed my journey toward emotional health and personal boundaries. He watched me transform from someone who apologized for taking up space to someone who could confidently express needs and expectations. Our conversations became more honest, our conflicts more productive, and our connections stronger. "You're different now," he told me one evening as we cooked dinner together in my kitchen. "Not different in your core personality, but different in how you move through the world. You seem more present." He was right. I had spent so many years mentally preparing for criticism and rejection that I hadn't been fully present in positive experiences. Now I could enjoy achievements without waiting for someone to diminish them. I could accept compliments without immediately deflecting them. I could make decisions based on what I wanted rather than what I thought would avoid disapproval. At work, I started forming genuine friendships with colleagues, instead of just professional relationships. When my coworker Sarah invited me to her birthday party, I didn't spend 3 days analyzing whether she really wanted me there or was just being polite. When my teammate Michael asked for my input on a project, I shared my ideas confidently, instead of qualifying every suggestion with apologies. Most surprisingly, I started developing closer relationships with friends I had known for years, but had kept at a distance. I realized I had been so afraid of being a burden that I never allowed anyone to really know me or help me with anything. As I became more open about my struggles and more willing to both offer and accept support, these friendships flourished in ways I hadn't expected. My friend Lauren, who I had known since college but had never felt truly close to, became one of my strongest supporters during this transition. When I finally told her about what had happened with my family, her response was immediate and unequivocal. "Mia, I've been watching you apologize for your success for years," she said. "I've seen you downplay your achievements and worry constantly about whether people like you. I always wondered where that came from. Now I understand." Having friends who genuinely celebrated my successes and supported me through difficulties showed me what I had been missing in family relationships. These people didn't need me to be less successful for them to feel good about themselves. They didn't compete with me or try to diminish my achievements. They simply enjoyed my company and wanted good things for me. About 4 months after Thanksgiving, I received an unexpected call from Jessica. Unlike her previous attempts at contact, this conversation felt different from the beginning. Her voice was subdued, and she asked if we could meet for coffee to talk privately. When we met the following weekend, she looked tired and uncertain. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened at Thanksgiving," she began, "and I keep coming back to something you said that night. You said that caring looks like defending your family member when they're being attacked, not sitting silently while it happens." I waited for her to continue, not sure where this conversation was heading. "You were right," she said quietly. "I sat there and watched our mother call you a burden, and I said nothing. I told myself I was staying out of it, but really, I was being a coward. And I've been doing that for years. This admission opened up a conversation about family dynamics that we had never been able to have before. Jessica talked about her own struggles with mom's expectations and criticism, and how she had learned to avoid being the target by redirecting attention to me. She acknowledged that this strategy had protected her, but had also made my experience worse. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to stand up to her the way you did," Jessica said honestly. "But I want you to know that I see what happened, and I'm sorry I didn't support you when you needed it." This conversation didn't immediately restore our relationship, but it was the beginning of a different kind of connection between us. For the first time, we talked honestly about our family, instead of pretending everything was normal. Jessica also shared information that helped me understand some of Mom's behavior. Apparently, in the weeks following Thanksgiving, Mom had been telling anyone who would listen that I had become too good for the family and was looking down on everyone because of my success. She was positioning herself as the victim of an ungrateful daughter rather than examining her own behavior. This information was both hurtful and liberating. It confirmed that Mom was not going to take responsibility for her words or actions, which meant I could stop hoping for an apology or acknowledgement that would never come. But it also validated my decision to step away from the relationship because it showed that her behavior was deliberate rather than accidental. Around this same time, I started getting pressure from extended family members who weren't at Thanksgiving but had heard Mom's version of events. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in months suddenly called to express concern about my attitude and to suggest that I should reconcile with Mom for the sake of the family. These conversations were illuminating because they showed me how family systems work to maintain dysfunction. Rather than holding Mom accountable for her hurtful behavior, everyone was focused on pressuring me to accept that behavior and return to my role as the family scapegoat. The priority was maintaining the appearance of family harmony rather than actually addressing the underlying problems. I learned to respond to these pressure tactics with simple, clear statements. I'm not willing to be in relationships where I'm consistently disrespected. If that changes, I'm open to conversation. Until then, I'm focusing on the relationships that are healthy and supportive. Most people didn't know how to respond to this approach because it didn't give them anything to argue with or try to fix. I wasn't attacking anyone or demanding that they choose sides. I was simply stating my boundaries and living according to them. This period of my life taught me that healing doesn't require other people to change their behavior or acknowledge their mistakes. Healing comes from accepting reality as it is and making choices that protect your own well-being. I couldn't make Mom love me differently, but I could choose not to subject myself to treatment that was harmful to my mental and emotional health. By the time my next birthday rolled around in March, I felt like a completely different person than I had been at that disastrous Thanksgiving dinner. Instead of dreading the day and wondering if anyone would remember or care, I planned a celebration with people who genuinely wanted to be there. Jake organized a surprise party with my closest friends and colleagues. The evening was filled with laughter, genuine affection, and celebration of who I was, rather than criticism of who I wasn't. As I looked around the room at people who had chosen to be part of my life, I realized that I had finally found my real family. The most powerful moment came when my friend Michael raised a toast that brought tears to my eyes. To Mia, who taught us all that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept less than you deserve. Thank you for showing us what real strength looks like. That night, I didn't receive a call or text from Mom. For the first time in my life, that didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like confirmation that I had made the right choice in creating boundaries that protected my peace and well-being. The woman who had spent years trying to earn approval from people who were determined not to give it was gone. In her place was someone who understood that her worth wasn't up for debate. Her achievements didn't need external validation, and her love didn't have to be earned through perfect behavior or endless sacrifice. Looking back on that Thanksgiving evening, I can honestly say it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. Not because the confrontation was pleasant, or because I enjoyed hurting people I had once hoped to please, but because it forced me to finally choose myself. It taught me that sometimes the most important word you can learn to say is no. No to mistreatment. No to manipulation. No to relationships that require you to be smaller than you are. The greatest gift you can give yourself is refusing to be small for others' comfort. Family should lift you up and tear you down. And if they can't celebrate your success, then they don't deserve a front row seat to watch it unfold. Real love doesn't require you to apologize for your achievements or hide your light to make others feel better about themselves. Real love celebrates your growth, supports your dreams, and chooses your well-being over their own convenience. If someone in your life consistently fails that test, maybe it's time to ask yourself if that relationship is serving your highest good. The people who truly belong in your life will never ask you to be less than you are. They'll challenge you to grow, support you through struggles, and celebrate your victories as if they were their own. Those are the relationships worth fighting for. Everything else is just people you happen to share DNA with. What about you? Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who couldn't celebrate your success? Have you found the courage to walk away from relationships that consistently left you feeling smaller than when you started? Drop a comment below and share your story. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life experiences about finding your voice and setting healthy boundaries. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might need the reminder that they deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, even by family members. Thank you for listening to my story and for being part of a community that believes in lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down. Remember, you are worthy of love and respect exactly as you are. Never let anyone convince you otherwise. Until next time, be kind to yourself and choose relationships that choose you back.